If you can please introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Stacey Marie Robinson.
And you are the founder of?
Kaya Publishing, yes.
And so this event that is here is called the Toronto Urban Book Expo. And how long have you been running this event?
This is our 4th year of running this event.
Okay, and what got you started?
Actually, I've been a writer for as long as I've been able to write. I've been a storyteller, and I got to the point where I started looking for a publisher and I started looking for an agent and opportunities, and it was difficult for me to find the opportunities and almost difficult for me to pursue certain certain directions with my career. So I said, why don't I just start creating my own platform? So I started small at the Malvern Library, and I just had a few writer friends with me, and then we just decided to share books amongst our friends and family, and then we did it the next year, and it started to grow, and then last year it grew again, and then now I'm realizing that the writer community is supportive, and so it just started out as a way for me to have somewhere to display my books, and now it's turned into more of a community effort instead of less about me and more about kind of the sharing in the community. Yeah.
That's great. I actually want to touch a bit on, you said that there were difficulties that you have, and that's why. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I had started looking for a publisher around the time when I guess I was in my early 20s, and I would send out the query letters, and I would look for an agent, and I wasn't getting positive responses. So part of me was, you start to doubt yourself. Is it my writing? Is it my technique? Is it the approach? Is it the industry? And there's a lot of unanswered questions, so rather than stress myself out trying to answer those questions, I just said, let me just avoid the whole asking others for permission to do what I want to do, and let me just create a platform where I'll just do what I want to do and enjoy myself and have fun. So.
Okay, and so what exactly is urban fiction?
Urban fiction, I'm trying to maybe slightly define it differently in a Canadian context, but I'll start by saying in the American context, which is kind of where I'd say the genre started and where it thrives. It's more like a street fiction, or sometimes they call it like a hip-hop fiction, but what it's meaning to me is more like a Canadian urban experience, and it's a cultural experience, an African Canadian experience, a Caribbean Canadian, maybe a new immigrant experience, a second generation Canadian experience. So I don't want to say that it's street literature, I just kind of feel like it's a cultural experience starting here in Toronto, just the city living, which for us is going to be a multicultural type of feel, but it always kind of leans towards the African and Caribbean experience, I find, with the writers that do this type of literature. So what I'm hoping Canadian urban fiction will turn into is just more of a cultural reflection of the contemporary Canadians and just their lifestyle and how they're living here and the influences of their culture and the country, and that's the genre I'm trying to build.
So when I'm hearing that, I'm wondering, do you think that's part of the reason maybe you're facing the difficulties is the lack of people understanding or connecting to that sort of genre?
I think that's it. Like, we have a lot of strong Black writers in Canada, obviously, legendary writers that have been here for generations. But I do believe there's a generation that, maybe even me, and I'm almost 40 now, but I almost still don't identify with a younger generation. So I imagine there's a lot of changes between just in a few years, the way the literature is presented and the way people are telling the story. So I think maybe to people within the culture develops and moves really quickly, and we need to keep up maybe with the bigger literary landscape. They're not catching up as quickly to the things that we notice right away. So I think they don't understand when I say it's urban fiction. I don't want to say it's Black fiction. I don't want to say it's Caribbean fiction, because it's Toronto and I'm here, and I just think it's an urban Toronto experience. So it's hard to communicate that to an industry that maybe just thinks all Black fiction is the same, or all Caribbean fiction, or Black Canadians. So I think there's a lack of understanding in a few directions.
So are you finding that there are more Canadian authors that are even just coming here to your event than when you started out?
When I started out, it was just people, very small network of people that I knew, and each year there's people that I'm meeting, like from Brampton now and Mississauga and different parts of the city that aren't in my personal network, but they've been writing for years. And there's a gentleman here, and he's got his book in chapters, so he's a self-published author, but he's already making all these strides. So I find the event is kind of like drawing different writers together, and now we have a chance to network, and the American writers are coming, and now we're all kind of building the community that maybe wouldn't have been as easy to find if there wasn't an event like this to focus it on.
Okay, Kelvin, it's nice to catch up with you again here at the Toronto Urban Book Expo. And we just wanted to catch up and see what's happening. Last time we read about The Longest Night. And is the next edition coming out? And if so, when? And what can we expect from that?
Yes, the next edition is coming out. It's set to come out in October of 2017. And the next edition will give you more insight into the past. So the story jumps around a lot in terms of time. So the first book really kind of jumps you into the heat of the action, and you're not really sure what's going on. So the second book will provide more insight to the main character Yarrow and how he got to where he is. And then, actually, I'll leave it at that. So it'll answer more questions, basically. Yeah.
Okay, great. Is this your first time here at Toronto Urban Book Expo?
Yeah, this is my first time here. I meant to come here years ago. I think this is the fourth year. Yeah, and I meant to come in previous years, but something always came up and I couldn't make it. But I made a conscious effort to be here for this one. So I'm really glad it's here. There's tons of Black authors around. It's really great vibe. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
My name is Jessica Norwood. I'm from Buffalo, New York.
And can you give us a little bit about your book? Let us know what the book is and what it's about.
Yes, it's called Running Away from Love. I published it in July 2015. It's my first book, and it's basically a come-of-age story. I would say a love story about a young woman, a young successful woman who's navigating her way through life in love. And I feel like love is probably the most thing that shapes who you are as a person. So you go to different trials and tribulations, and it's just her story as to how she grew and became the woman that she is today.
Excellent. So how long have you been writing?
Oh gosh, I've been writing since I was probably like 6 or 7. Yeah.
And what inspired you to write this particular book?
Life. Just different things that I've experienced, different things some of my friends experienced, and I've always had it in my head, this story, and I decided to just go for it and see what happens.
So would you say that a lot of what's in there, or some of it is basically your personal life?
Some of it is experiences that I've experienced personally, and some of it is just some things that my friends may have experienced. So I take different aspects of different relations that I may have built and kind of embellish off of that. It's not all real, but it's kind of like some aspects, because I feel like it's important to have a connection. Because if you can't connect to my writing, I kind of think you won't remember me. So I want you to be able to remember it.
Great. So is this your first time at this expo?
My second time. I came last year in February, I believe. It was during like the All-Star weekend, I believe. Yeah, so this is my second time here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for taking these few minutes with us. Thanks. And so your event is actually the only one of its kind in all of Canada.
I believe so.
Yep. And so with that being said, would you ever consider maybe taking it on tour around other provinces?
Absolutely. I'm planning a trip to Winnipeg soon. I said, let me just get outside of like my Toronto way of thinking and see what's happening in other urban locations. Like I have a cousin that she moved up from Jamaica, but she lived in Toronto for a while, and then she moved to Saskatchewan. So when she tells me about living in Regina or living in Saskatoon, their dynamic is different. She's like with the Indigenous people and the Canadians and the African communities, so their urban experience is different than a Toronto urban experience. So now I'm thinking, okay, maybe I need to start looking across Canada and see how they're defining urban, because it's not just going to be, say, a black or white thing like it might be in the US or even in Toronto. Like it's going to have a different meaning in Canada. So I'm hoping eventually to just branch out and see what's going on, and then maybe from there build an event or a little community or something.
And are you finding like there are more men or women that are authors in this particular genre?
It's
or is it's pretty balanced?
I think it's pretty balanced, and even from the U.S., and I always use them as my model because they've created like a really big industry with it. But it seems pretty balanced, men and women telling their kind of their sides of the same story. So, yeah.
So I just want to say thank you so much for holding an event like this, because we really need it in our community. For people who are looking for this, they need somewhere to be able to find it. So we thank you for that, and continue the great work.
Thank you so much.
All right,
And I have to first pay respect to like a different book list and knowledge bookstore because they have similar events. Sorry, they also have similar events where they'll bring writers out. So I'm gonna pay my respects to them and to the Afrofest and Word on the Street. So there are events like that, but what I'm trying to do is just take it a little bit more specific. So I appreciate you guys acknowledging that, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak about it.
Thank you.